All right, thanks for indulging me, folks. It is about 7 minutes to. We will move to the public comment period. Is there anyone here who signed up who wants to speak in favor of the application? Wait, there's a whole... No. Is there anyone here who would like to speak against? We have a list there? There's a sign-up sheet. If someone would be kind enough to... Thank you. I got a pen out of the deal. Let's see. Don McAlson? They changed the order. Oh, they changed the order. All right, number 1. Oh, Campbell Hudson. Attorney Hudson. He changed the order. He put himself in. Yes. Please name for the record.
For the record, my name is Campbell Hudson. I'm an attorney. My offices are in Centerbrook, not far from here. I'm going to try to keep my remarks very brief. This is quite a few people want to say something. As I mentioned at the previous hearing that most of you are at, I represent the interveners in this matter, who are again interveners, Herb Clark, who's here, and Demco, who are owners of properties that are in the Heritage Industrial Park immediately adjoining this property. The Demco is the owner of that very large building that immediately butts this property to the east, in which a large facility is operated for Tower Laboratories, and they are strongly opposed to this application because of the detrimental effect not just on residential properties, but potentially on these industrial and adjoining properties. They feel that this will have a very detrimental impact. Just at the southern end of that Tower Laboratories Demco building, there is a wetlands area there, just to the east of the property that is the subject of this application. And the Demco owners are very concerned that that could be impacted by this as well, that in the wetlands area. Just a couple of comments, and then it's really important for the technical people to really address what is primarily a technical issue. Some of the things that these reports you've seen have talked also not only about waters being impacted by water flooding onto the property, but also what about if there was a fire. And you know, this stuff doesn't happen every day, but I don't think it's mere speculation. You can see, if you're familiar with stuff, about how frequently this seems to happen, even within our own area. The large fire that we just had up in Essex a few years ago, the large one in Willimantic, and very recently in Queens, New York. These places have a history of that perhaps comes from not paying attention. I don't know the answer to that. But when all the water gets poured on this to put out the fires, it's got to go somewhere. And where does it go? Back into the wetlands. One of the important things to talk about is the wetlands, and the Department of Agriculture report that you talked about before also talks about watercourses, which is in fact part of your jurisdiction as well. And the Hammock River starts right across the tracks there. So these are the headwaters of the Hammock River, and I think you all know better than I where the Hammock River flows, comes out into the harbor, and I believe that is something that you need to seriously consider as well. One of the things that was interesting in hearing some of the comments tonight, which answers some of the things, that there seems to be a view by the applicant that underlies this. And it's been stated that this is the same use as one of the general uses that has been proposed. I can tell you we strongly disagree with that view. We believe this is not a permitted use under the current zoning regulations applicable to this property, and they're going to have to do steps to address that. Now, ultimately, that's a zoning issue, not an issue for this commission, but I think it's important to understand behind this. We think that this is a very different type of use than what was being done there before, and therefore the standards are very different. We do disagree with the comments made by Attorney Shields before. Obviously, that's what we lawyers do. But one of the things he did mention, he said the same activity. We disagree with that, and he talked about mere speculation. We're not talking about here that stuff that is mere speculation with respect to flooding, with respect to the potential for fire, with respect to all these other issues. These aren't just things that might happen somewhere once in a blue moon. These are things that regularly can be expected to happen, as will be the effects of sea level rise. So this is not mere speculation. I think that the big point here is that, and I said this before, and certainly where my clients come from, they understand the need for these facilities. They understand that this man has a right to make a living doing the sort of things he does. All of this stuff has to be dealt with. There's no argument with that. In fact, we understand these people are in the construction business themselves. They have dealt with this in the past. The real key thing here is it's not an appropriate site for that type of work. And I think that that was actually well stated in Andrew Bevilacqua's letter, which was actually read at the beginning, but I just want to reread this one little conclusion at the end of his, because I think he stated very well. Said, the operation of the facility is at least as important as the initial design in terms of the long-term protection of the environment. They've got good engineers. We have no doubt that their engineers are very good. But this type of facility has a history, not by these people necessarily, but who knows, of not being operated on the long term the way that they should be. It says the location of this facility, this is again from the Bevilacqua letter, near inland and possibly tidal wetlands and within a FEMA designated floodplain will only serve to magnify the critical need for highly effective best management practices in the facility's day-to-day operations. A similar facility in a location without these critical environmental constraints would have a greater margin of error and possibly less overall concerns about the potential operational issues. That's the point. This is a lousy place to put something like this. With that, I'll turn it over to the next people in the line who are, I think, the technical people, Steve Trinkus.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Steve Trinkus?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Trinkus for the record. I'm a professional engineer from Southbury, Connecticut. One of the residents is passing out copies of a letter from March 2nd from my office that is in response to the revised plans and the comments from the applicant. I know Mr. Allen from Land Tech a long time ago, but in looking at his report, and I'm not a wetland scientist, but in reading his assessment of the stormwater management report, it basically parrots what's in the Laredo report. It's not really an independent evaluation, you know, it's repeating the same information. So I think you need a better assessment. I think Rich Snarsky gave you that. It's been discussed on the forecast of weather events. You know, if we look back at, I think it was Hurricane Irma that hit Florida, 12 hours beforehand, it was forecast to go up the East Coast and went the other way. So, you know, you're not going to get 10 days forecast. You can also have summertime thunderstorms that can come through and drop 3 inches of rain in a 4-hour period with, quite honestly, 2 hours warning. That's the type of weather that we have. We have short duration, high intensity rainfall events that show up very quickly, especially during the hot summer. You know, the screens with the non-woven filter fabric on the bottom, the non-woven filter fabric, you can poke a stick through. This is what we use on top of septic systems. It's not a highly durable material because it's very fibrous and it's easily cut and broken. So things can get out. You also have the upper section beyond 4 foot that's completely open. You'll hear, I think, maybe one of the other residents from the area talk about airborne pollutants. You know, these are big garage doors. That they're open. The building is not sealed. We keep hearing this is under a building. It's sealed. Well, it's not sealed. The doors are open. So this material is being processed. And when you start moving construction debris around, dust is very common. The way to keep dust out is to water it. Now you have things draining off. I will tell you, having worked for developers since the late 70s, older developers, and thank God, unfortunately, they have passed away, but they would pretty much throw everything in dumpsters, paint cans, thinner, you name it. You know, they didn't segregate stuff, and I think it's really unrealistic to, if you're bringing a load in here, you've got to dump it on the floor to see what's in it. And once you have it on the floor, you know, if there is some spillage, it's on its way out the door. I mean, that's the reality here. You're not, how do you see what's in the bottom of the dumpster? If these trucks are coming and they should have a loose tarp over them, you know, you can get rainfall in them. You know, it's really impossible to say you're going to keep this material dry. That's just, it's not a reality in this type of stuff. You know, there are changes. I have to disagree with Mr. Allen. There will be changes in the water quality of the wetlands because of the lack of appropriate treatment by the stormwater systems. Mr. Snarski is right on point. Separators are secondary. They are also not 80% efficient. I do have one typo in the middle of page 2. I talk about 18 years ago from 2010. It should be 8 years. The New Jersey TARP data goes back a long time. It's not the state of the art. I cited it last time. I'll say it again for the record. The University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center has research of a real-world parking lot, 9 acres of directly connected pavement, and separators in this configuration online remove 29% of total suspended solids. That's the reality. You can take all of the information in the back of the Laredo report from Contact. It's nice, it's a paperweight, it's not relevant to this application. The configuration of the separators is the problem. The DEP Stormwater Manual from 2004 also talks about retrofits. And if we subscribe to the applicant's philosophy, well, this is the same building, the same parking area. Well, just because it's the same building, same parking area, and pollutants were occurring in the past, you have a different use being proposed here. You need to address water quality, because otherwise we're not going to make positive improvements in the environment unless we fix problems that already exist, as far as that goes. Our attorney talked about the fire aspect, so while I mentioned the letter, I'm not going to get into that. On the survey maps by the applicant, the old wetland boundary is still shown on there. Mr. Allen's boundary is shown on the Laredo site plans, but for consistency, you should have the correct information on all plans. It's also noted that part of the flood line goes into this wet swale behind the building on the south side. If it's subject to tidal flows and moderate wave action, and that's exactly what it says on the plan, then you may have some tidal influence here. I mean, I'm not a wetland scientist, so I'm just going by what's on the plan. Again, the separators do not address water quality. You need a primary system. The wet swale the applicant proposes, as the chairman asked about, it's on the east side of the building. It's primarily getting the water from that upper wetland. The majority of the parking lot and the truck scales, where all the trucks are coming in, are on the other side, the west side. So this swale is not going to do much of anything. It may treat that little bit of water, but 50 or 60 feet of a wet swale is not going to give you a high pollutant removal, especially when there's not much pollutants in the water in the first place. So all the water on the west side, which comes into the swale between the spur line and the rail, is not going to be adequately treated, and that's going to go into the freshwater wetlands and ultimately into your tidal wetlands, as far as that goes. Another aspect of the DEP manual is what's called the runoff capture volume. For sites that are within 500 feet of a tidal boundary, which I would submit this applies, that you need to retain the first inch of runoff from the impervious area. It's the same as the water quality volume, but they call it the runoff capture volume. That has not been provided. It's not a treatment, it's a retention on the site, so you're not discharging that potentially polluted water. We've heard a lot that everything's coming in by truck and we're going to have 2,500 tons and 45% of it's going to be recycled. Well, I have an obvious question. If you're recycling 45%, what happens to everything else? I mean, what happens to all the other material, quite honestly? If you're recycling a certain amount of the wood and everything, what do you do with the rest of it? We have yet to hear what's going to happen to that other material. Does it leave the site? We're being told that some of it's going to leave by rail, some will leave by truck, but there's not a definitive statement that, yes, we're taking out so many tons by rail. You have no information on that. So you have to go, to me, on the assumption that it's all going to go in and out by truck. And again, movement of the vehicles themselves simply increase the pollutant loads on the site as far as that goes. And I stick by my conclusions from my first letter. This will have adverse water quality impacts on the wetlands. The stormwater management system is not adequate to address those. There's some other technical concerns. The applicant is showing the pipes on the west side to be upgraded from 24 to 36-inch pipe. Well, if we're not changing the impervious area, why are we going to bigger pipes? There's a lot of unanswered questions, in my professional opinion, that we just don't know the answers of. But as proposed, even with the modifications, it poses a highly probable adverse impact. We know separators do not do much for soluble pollutants. So oils and grease can be in solution, and they can pass through online separators such as this and be discharged right into the freshwater wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trinkus. Mr. Hiddle, are you here?
For the record, my name is Darby Hiddle, speaking on behalf of the intervener. I'm a Connecticut licensed environmental professional with more than 20 years' experience evaluating potential impacts to sites. Thank you. Thank you to the committee members. Seems like you're asking all the right questions. I've got some overheads, if I could get them up here. Jim, did you give them copies of the? Okay, so yeah, what you have here is actually just sort of a recap of what was talked about last month by me. That we had a number of interested parties asking to see actual copies of what I was referring to. There's just a couple of important documents that I think you need to be aware of. And so I understand that the applicant has modified their application and is now proposing a number of safety measures or a number of measures, you know, from what I heard tonight, that are aimed at reducing potential impacts to the on-site and adjacent wetlands. And that's interesting because in the applicant's submittal to the DEP on the coastal consistency review form, if I could just get the next page up there, I want to forward. And so go back, here we go. So it's interesting, in section 4, let's see. Here we go. On page 4 of 5, the applicant has indicated that there are no potential impacts associated with this project, or that the potential impacts are simply not applicable. So my question to the commission and the committee is that if the applicant is acknowledging here at the town that there are potential impacts, you know, to the best of our knowledge, they have not resubmitted a revised coastal consistency review form acknowledging to the state of Connecticut that there are potential impacts. So can't have your cake and eat it too. They're telling us that they recognize that there are potential impacts and here's what they're going to do to address them, but at the state level, none of the potential impacts are applicable. And we have a problem with this. And again, to restate, you know, to restate that, you know, what has been said before, this just in our opinion is just not an appropriate location for this facility. Last month, we made the committee members aware of a general permit for the staging and transfer of contaminated soil, which is actually, I believe we have a copy of it here. A hard time here. Have a copy of the, here it is, here's a copy of the general permit. So we understand that the applicant has withdrawn the proposal to store material outdoors. And what we just want you to know is that this general permit to the state of Connecticut is a registration only. It can be obtained with just simply submitting a $250 check to the state of Connecticut. And this permit can be executed indoors as well as outdoors. Up to 10,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil and sediment could be staged and transferred at a site like this one simply by submitting a check to the state of Connecticut. So if the applicant chose to stage and transfer contaminated soil in the building, they could do so with this general permit. They likely could do so. And if you think there's money in getting rid of clean waste, you should understand that there's a lot more money associated in getting rid of contaminated waste. So, you know, this type of permit enables would enable the applicant to you know, have significantly greater revenue for the facility at a much higher risk. Much of the soil that could be staged and transferred under this general permit originates from contaminated sites such as gasoline stations where there have been leaking tanks, industrial facilities, and other sites where the contaminated soil is actually excavated from below the water table and it's saturated. It comes in with a high water content. And I'd really like to hear that. I liked to hear the DTC report. Their concerns are all valid about leachate. Steve just mentioned that the facility's not closed. There's going to be trucks driving in and out of the facility, so there will be leachate with any wet loads. And under this general permit, those wet loads would contain contamination that could potentially run right out into the wetlands. So in closing, although we understand that waste resources are needed in Connecticut, this is absolutely not an appropriate location for this facility. And the proposed facility, even though my understanding is that the proposed facility cannot be denied based on potential impacts, according to the applicant's attorney. You cannot deny the application based on potential impacts. This seems ridiculous. We pointed out many potential impacts. The applicant has stated to the state of Connecticut that they believe there are no potential impacts, and that we feel that the potential risk associated with this facility is simply unacceptable to this community. Thank you.
All right, yay, very good, very good. You all want to learn. So right now it is 9:15, and what we are checking feverishly, where's Christine, where's our first one? She is checking for us. She's busy, she's on the phone right now. Yes, she's on the phone. She's checking to see what facilities are available so that we can get everyone who signed up an opportunity to speak, because as I said, 9:30 is when we are booted out of here. We do have, and what we're up against is a window for us to close the public hearing. And statutorily, we've got 20 more days to do that. If they give us an extension, which I'm hoping they will do. Which brings us up to April 23rd. We have confirmed that the green room at the town hall is available on April 23rd. However, it would not accommodate, likely wouldn't accommodate this number of folks. So that's what Christina, she was checking to see if Morgan is available on or before that date. So what we will need to do before we close this evening is to identify what that date and that time will be, so you all know. And then what I'd love to do is have it right now so that anyone who signed up would be not able to make that date. We'd move you to the head of the list so that you can get your comments in right tonight, okay? But until we have that date, we're going to go ahead with the Yep, it is a Monday. So we'll move next to number 4. It's Don. Yep, go ahead. Oh, yes, ma'am.
My name is Don McCallson. I'm from...
hang on, Don. She has a question, I believe. Just procedural, I believe.
Thank you. Yes. You have to go to the microphone.
Is there a way for people to publicly comment or express their comments to you guys? Do you have an email we should
Sure.
send to?
Certainly.
Maybe
Letters,
some of us don't want to
emails.
come out. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
My name's Don McCallson, 7 Settlers Lane in Clinton. First of all, I'd like to thank the commissioners, all of you, for the great work you're doing. It's very hard work. And I'd like to look at you guys as the guardian of our very precious wetlands. Now, I've heard comments last month and tonight from the applicants like they're going to be the guardians of the wetlands. Now, I don't believe that for a minute. They said they were so proud of the fact last month that they were the only This was going to be the only facility of this kind that was done, where everything was going to be done indoors. Tonight, they said 6 times that all of the processing was going to be done indoors. In fact, there are no doors. Last month, they explained the construction of the building, and on the north wall and on the south wall being adjacent to the tracks, that there are multiple large openings that are doorways, basically, all along both sides of the building. And these doors at that point would never be closed. In fact, there are no doors. Tonight we find out that they have screens. Well, screens don't keep out dust. Certainly the top doesn't keep out dust. So let me ask everyone here to picture yourself standing in the middle of that building. You're standing in that building when it's fully operational. A tractor trailer comes in and dumps 40,000 pounds of debris. First of all, how do you inspect what's in the truck before you dump it on the area? Okay? Now, if anybody knows anything about construction debris, when you dump 40,000 pounds on the ground in this building, which has no doors, there's going to be a cloud of dust. A cloud of dust that contains maybe hazardous materials, but certainly very, very fine material, very fine dust that's going to be suspended for a long time. So let's think about this. The doors are open, they have some screens, which don't stop the dust. Now let's just say from the north, there's a 10-mile-an-hour wind coming from the north. What's going to happen? It's going to blow this cloud of dust right out the south side of the building, over the railroad track, over that little trough that has part of the inland border, over the open land, and in 28 seconds, it's going to go 140 yards right where that big condo complex is. Is it going to stop there? These fine particles stay suspended for a long, long time. This material can go all the way to the shoreline. Now, there was a discussion about asbestos. The applicant said last month that there's a lot of regulations and lots of permits that you have to get and expensive fees, but they do all that to just prove that there's no asbestos in the load. Do you really believe that that's what's going to happen with every load that comes into this place? I don't believe that for a minute. And besides my speculation on that, last month they said, when he was explaining what's in the trucks, as was mentioned tonight, and I'll quote as clearly as I can, well, there's construction debris, but sometimes there's cans of oil, sometimes there's paint, sometimes there's propane tanks, sometimes there's tires. Tonight, the gentleman said you're going to have incidental occurrences of these other materials other than construction debris. Well, I was given a copy of the DEP applicants where they show how much of these other materials that they want to be allowed to bring in. If you look at the weight, it corresponds to 1,252 tires a day, 278 propane tanks. If they didn't expect that kind of volume, why would they put it in the application to the DEP? Makes no sense. And as far as liquid on the floor, well, I talked to a lot of construction people who are in the business of construction debris, and I say, how do you deal with this dust? They say, oh, we spray it with water. Well, that's not a great solution, because now you got a slurry on the floor that everybody's walking through. The trucks are dragging it out into the driveway, up into the roads. So what happens with this debris on the roads when the first rain comes up? Where's that going to go? Right into the wetlands. And how about this dust cloud that comes out the south side of the building? It's going to deposit some of that dust right on the ground. When the rain comes out, where's that going to go? Where's it going to go? Right, I can't talk, I understand that. Right in the wetlands. So I think there's so many problems with this. And that...
Are you almost done, Dan?
I almost
That was
done.
perfect.
I'm really going to go fast. A lot of things have been said. But I want to mention one quick thing. They talked about the fires. You know, the fires can be a disaster. Now we're talking about burning tires, black billowing smoke, and worrying about exploding propane tanks. I wouldn't want to send our volunteers in to fight that fire. But in conclusion, I want to say this. What happens after the fire? What happens if they abandon a property? Maybe there's no fire. Maybe the business plan doesn't work out, and they go bankrupt, and they abandon the property. But what happens if DEP comes in and says, you've been contaminating the wetlands for the last 2 years, we're shutting you down? Then where are we? We have an environmental cleanup disaster that the town and its taxpayers might be liable for cleaning up this terrible mess that they left behind. And it doesn't sound like a very good situation to me. And I think it's, as the guardian of our wetlands, with all the information that's come through, I hate to say it, but I think it would be irresponsible for this commission to approve this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. All right. It is 9:24, and we did get word from Christine. She's earning her salary tonight, that this facility, the school, is available on the 16th through the 20th, but I think you're committed on the 18th for ZBA. So 16, 17, 19, or 20. So I'm looking to the commissioners as to whether or not anyone has a conflict with any of those dates. April 16, 17, 19, or 20. 20 is a Friday? So you don't want Fridays, you don't want Mondays? 16, 17, 19, 20. So will the 17th work for everybody? That is a Tuesday. That is tax day. It's good for Chris. Chris, you're good. Eddie, you're good. Carl? Should be okay. Everybody else? Okay. So Andrew's got a motion to a special meeting on the 17th of April at what time? 6:30? 7 o'clock again?
Public hearing. Not a special meeting, a public hearing.
It's a special meeting that will be a continuance of the public hearing.
Okay.
Here.
Hang on one second, sir. We got a motion on the table. So here is for a continuance of the public hearing. At 7, yeah. Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Bertram has a second. Any discussion that's going to work? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Or, oh, I'm sorry. You're saying it's not going to work? 23rd, but the facility is not going to be large enough. Town hall. Is that okay? If we do it, can you get coverage? Attorney Cronan.
Make a decision.
You sure? Okay. Did we vote on that? I believe we did. Oh, well, just all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. So if folks got that, what we will be is back here, in this location, on April 17th, 7 p.m. again. We already have a list of folks who signed up to speak. We'll continue with that list, starting with number 5 is Joanne, and continuing on. If other folks decide they want to speak, or as this woman asked, we certainly will entertain comments through email, through letters, through anything of the sort. Okay, yes, sir. You have your hand up for quite a while. I can't guarantee how much time, but we will certainly endeavor to give you as much time as we possibly can. Yes, we're going to start with the folks who have already signed up. Yes, you're welcome. Does anybody else have? Okay, we're still. Okay, so you just want this to go into the record. Oh, you'll be back. Yep. Okay, and you will be here on the 17th, so you can also speak to that.
Hi, guys.
Yes, Ron Parker, PE, Uncas Road. Yep, we'll see you then. Thanks. All right. You're very welcome. Okay. Are there any other? All right, do I have any theater to adjourn?
This is something to look at for the next couple of weeks.
Second, all in favor? Is there an email address? It would go to the land use office?
These are extra. Your best bet is to send it directly to the clerk for the commission, which is Sherry Hines, which the address is SHYNES@clintonct.org. Okay?